She's just a junior accountant, my boss told the client. Let's have the senior team handle your portfolio. I quietly gathered my files to leave. The client stood up. Where is she going? I specifically requested Sophia. She's the reason I'm moving my entire $5 million here. My boss's face turned white when the client added. In fact, if Sophia Winters doesn't personally manage my accounts, I'm walking out that door and taking my business to Goldman Sachs. Marcus Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries, pointed directly at me while my boss, Harold Fitzgerald, stood frozen like a deer in headlights. The entire senior management team, people who ignored me for 3 years, suddenly turned to stare at the junior accountant they relegated to fetching coffee and filing reports. The conference room on the 42nd floor of our Manhattan office had never felt smaller. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the October sun cast long shadows across the mahogany table where 7 senior partners sat in their $3,000 suits, probably calculating how a 26-year-old junior accountant could possibly torpedo their biggest deal of the quarter. Harold's face had gone from white to a concerning shade of purple, his mouth opening and closing like a goldfish gasping for air. "Mr. Ashford," Harold finally managed, his voice cracking slightly, "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Sophia here is talented, certainly, but she's only been with us for 3 years. She doesn't have the experience. Marcus Ashford laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "This junior accountant saved my company $1.2 million in tax liabilities last year with a restructuring strategy your senior team missed entirely. She identified accounting errors that could have triggered an IRS audit. And she did it all while you had her organizing your files and scheduling your meetings." I stood at the door, my box of files pressed against my chest, watching my entire professional life flip upside down in real time. 3 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and patronized were crumbling in front of me. And all I could think was how my mother would react when she heard that Marcus Ashford, the Marcus Ashford whose face graced the cover of Fortune magazine last month, had just declared me indispensable. "Sophia," Marcus said, turning to me with the same intensity that had built his manufacturing empire from nothing, "are you staying or leaving? Because wherever you go, my money follows." The thick carpet muffled my footsteps as I walked back to the conference table. Every eye tracked my movement. Harold's panicked, the senior partners calculating, Marcus is satisfied. I set my files down with deliberate calm, though my hands trembled slightly. 3 years of being invisible had not prepared me for this moment of being seen, truly seen, by the most powerful people in the room. "Perhaps," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we should discuss the terms of Mr. Ashford's portfolio management." Harold's eye twitched. "Of course. Why don't you sit down, Sophia? Next to me. We'll handle this together." "No," Marcus interrupted. "Sophia sits at the head of the table. She's the lead on this account. Non-negotiable." The head of the table. Where Harold always sat. Where the managing partner commanded the room during every client meeting. The silence that followed Marcus's declaration was so complete I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant honk of traffic 42 floors below. Senior partner Janet Morrison, who hadn't acknowledged my existence since my first day, actually gasped. I didn't move immediately. Instead, I looked Harold directly in the eye, something I'd rarely done in 3 years of employment. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I believe Mr. Ashford has made his position clear. Shall I take the lead on this account, or should we inform him that Fitzgerald and Associates is unable to meet his requirements?" The calculation in Harold's eyes was transparent. $5 million in assets. The firm's largest individual client. The prestige of managing Ashford Industries' portfolio. His throat worked as he swallowed his pride along with what I imagined was a considerable amount of bile. "Take the seat, Sophia," he ground out between clenched teeth. I walked to the head of the table with measured steps, my sensible heels clicking against the hardwood floor where the carpet ended. The leather chair was still warm from Harold's presence. As I settled into it, I caught my reflection in the polished table surface, young face, drugstore makeup, the same and tailor suit I'd worn to my interview 3 years ago because I still couldn't afford the designer clothes my colleagues wore. But Marcus Ashford didn't care about any of that. "Now then," I said, opening my files with hands that had finally stopped shaking, "let's discuss your portfolio objectives, Mr. Ashford." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "Please, call me Marcus. We've been working together for over a year, after all." Another gasp from the senior partners. A year. I'd been managing one of the city's wealthiest individuals for a year, and none of them had known. Because when you're invisible, you can do remarkable things without anyone noticing, until the moment they realize they need you. "Of course, Marcus," I replied, allowing myself a small smile. "Let's start with the offshore holdings restructuring we discussed last week." Harold made a choking sound. "Offshore holdings?" I pulled out a comprehensive analysis I'd prepared at home, after hours, on my ancient laptop because I didn't have access to the premium financial software the senior team used. Mr. Ashford has significant holdings in the Cayman Islands that require restructuring to comply with new Treasury regulations. I've identified a strategy that will maintain tax efficiency while ensuring full legal compliance. How do you, senior partner Davidson started, then stopped himself, probably realizing how it would look to admit they had no idea what their junior accountant had been doing. How do I know about Treasury regulations? I finished for him. I read them. Every update, every revision. I study them on my commute, during lunch breaks, and yes, while I'm filing your expense reports and organizing your schedules. Marcus chuckled. She called me last Christmas Eve, to warn me about a regulatory change taking effect January 1st, saved me a fortune in penalties. When's the last time any of you called a client on Christmas Eve? The senior partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. They billed $500 an hour and considered themselves too important for such dedication. But I billed nothing, officially. I was just support staff, the invisible girl who kept the office running smoothly while real accountants did important work. The restructuring plan, I continued, pulling out more documents, involves creating a new holding company in Delaware, transferring the Cayman assets through a specific series of transactions that take advantage of treaty provisions, and ultimately reducing tax liability by approximately 18% while improving regulatory compliance. I spread the papers across the table, flowcharts, projections, legal analysis. Months of work completed in secret, in stolen moments between fetching coffee and making copies. The senior partners leaned forward despite themselves, their experienced eyes recognizing the elegance of the strategy. This is? Janet Morrison breathed, this is brilliant. Yes, Marcus agreed. It is. Which is why I want Sophia managing all of it. Every account, every transaction, every strategic decision. With full signing authority. Signing authority? Harold's voice went up an octave. She doesn't have her CPA license yet. I cleared my throat. Actually, I do. I passed the exam 6 months ago. I didn't mention it because. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Because it didn't seem relevant to my position. The lie hung in the air, obvious to everyone. I hadn't mentioned it because Harold would have seen it as a threat, would have found ways to keep me in my place. But Marcus Ashford had changed the game, and everyone in the room knew it. 6 months, Harold repeated faintly. You've had your CPA for 6 months. 7 months, actually, I corrected. I also completed my master's in taxation from NYU last spring. Evening classes. I didn't request time off. Davidson leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. NYU's tax program is one of the most competitive in the country. How did you, perfect GPA, Marcus interrupted. She graduated summa cum laude while working full-time and managing my portfolio. Tell them about the professor, Sophia. Heat crept up my neck. It's not important. Professor Williamson, Marcus continued anyway, head of the tax law department, tried to recruit her for his private practice. Offered her double what she makes here. She turned him down. He looked pointedly at Harold. Though I'm starting to wonder why. The uncomfortable silence stretched out again. They all knew why. Fitzgerald and Associates was one of the most prestigious firms in Manhattan. Working here opened doors, built connections, established careers. Even as a junior accountant, even while being ignored and undervalued, the name on my resume meant something. I'd been playing a long game, and Marcus Ashford had just accelerated my timeline by about 10 years. Well, Harold said, his voice strained, it seems we've been underutilizing your talents, Sophia. That's one way to put it, Marcus said dryly. Here's what's going to happen. Sophia manages my portfolio with complete autonomy. She reports directly to me, not to any of you. She gets her own office, a real office, not that closet you've got her in now. And her compensation needs to reflect her actual value. Mr. Ashford, Janet Morrison interjected smoothly, surely we can discuss compensation privately. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. If we're restructuring my role, let's be transparent about all of it. Marcus's smile widened. I love it. Full transparency. Sophia currently makes $52,000 a year. It's public record, she filed it on her financial aid applications for NYU. For reference, that's less than my driver makes. And he doesn't manage $5 million in assets. Harold's face had progressed from purple to an alarming shade of red. The other senior partners studied their phones, the table, anything but the scene unfolding in front of them. They all knew what junior accountants made, they'd all started there once. But none of them had been managing major clients as juniors. What would you consider appropriate compensation? Harold asked through gritted teeth. For a portfolio manager handling $5 million in assets. Marcus pretended to consider. Market rate starts at $150,000 base, plus performance bonuses. But that's for someone managing standard portfolios. Sophia's strategies have yielded returns 15% above market average. So let's say $200,000 base, 20% performance bonus, and full benefits including parking. Parking? I blurted out before I could stop myself. Partners got parking. Senior managers got parking. Junior accountants took the subway and walked 6 blocks in the rain. Of course parking, Marcus said. You can't be late to our meetings because of train delays. Speaking of which, he checked his Rolex. We have a conference call with my Singapore partners in an hour. Sophia, I trust you've prepared the analysis on the Asian market expansion? I had, of course. At home, on my own time, using financial data I'd painstakingly gathered from public sources because I didn't have access to the firm's premium research databases. It's in my files. I'll need 15 minutes to set up the presentation. Use the executive conference room, Harold said weakly. It has better video conferencing. The executive conference room. Where I'd served coffee countless times but never been invited to sit. The ivory tower of Fitzgerald and Associates, with its Persian rugs and original artwork in view of Central Park. I nodded as if this was perfectly normal, as if my world hadn't just tilted off its axis. One more thing, Marcus said as the senior partners began to gather their things, eager to escape the uncomfortable reversal of power. I'll be recommending Sophia to several of my colleagues who are looking for new representation. The Pemberton family, the Chandlers, possibly the Fitzgerald Trust. Oh wait. He looked at Harold with false innocence. That might be a conflict of interest, managing your family's money. Never mind. Harold's family trust was worth $50 million. Everyone knew it. And Marcus had just dangled it, and its potential management fees, in front of me before snatching it away. The power play was so blatant, so perfectly executed, that I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. As the room emptied, leaving just Marcus and me, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. Why? I asked quietly. Why reveal all of this now? We had a good system. Marcus stood, straightening his Italian suit jacket. Because I'm tired of watching talent be wasted. Because Harold Fitzgerald needs to learn that the most valuable assets aren't always the most visible ones. And because? He paused at the door. Because my daughter just graduated from college. She's brilliant, driven, and about to enter a workforce that will try to make her invisible too. I want her to work in a world where someone like you is running the firm, not fetching coffee for it. He left me alone in the conference room, my conference room now, at least for the next hour. I sank into the leather chair and stared out at the city below. 3 years of invisibility had ended in a single morning. 3 years of strategies planned on subway rides, of analyses completed at kitchen tables, of client relationships built through stolen phone calls and weekend emails. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, Singapore call moved to 2 p.m. Take the morning to transition your desk. And Sophia? Don't let them lowball you on the salary. If they offer less than $200,000, walk. I'll have you set up in your own firm by Monday. My own firm. The thought was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. But first, I had a different kind of reckoning to face. I pulled up my mother's contact and typed out a message. Mom, something happened at work today. Can I come for dinner? I have news. Her response was immediate, of course. Bad news? Do you need money for rent? I smiled, thinking of the $200,000 salary Harold was about to grudgingly approve. No, Mom. Good news. Very good news. But I was getting ahead of myself. First, I had to navigate the next few hours, the Singapore call, the salary negotiation, the sudden shift from invisible to indispensable. I gathered my files and headed for the elevator, passing the cubicle farm where the other junior staff worked. They looked up as I passed, probably wondering why I was carrying files toward the executive floor instead of away from it. Sophia? Melissa, another junior accountant, called out. Aren't you supposed to be getting coffee for the Ashford meeting? No, I said simply. I'm supposed to be running it. The elevator doors closed on her shocked expression, and I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 3 years of being underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued had led to this moment. But as the elevator rose toward the executive floor, I knew this was just the beginning. The real work started now. The executive conference room was everything I'd imagined during those coffee-serving sessions, soft lighting that made everyone look younger, technology so seamless it was nearly invisible, and that view of Central Park that reminded you exactly how high you'd climbed in Manhattan's financial ecosystem. I spent 30 minutes setting up my presentation, transferring my homemade slides to the state-of-the-art system, trying not to think about how I'd created these analytical models on a 5-year-old laptop that crashed every time I opened too many Excel sheets. At 9:47 a.m., Harold appeared in the doorway. He'd recovered some of his composure, though his usual commanding presence seemed diminished in the wake of Marcus's ultimatum. "Sophia," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "we need to discuss your transition." I looked up from my laptop, keeping my expression professionally blank. "Of course. Would you like to discuss it here, or in your office?" The question hung between us, a subtle reminder that I was currently occupying the most prestigious space in the firm. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Here is fine. May I?" He gestured to a chair, asking permission to sit in his own conference room. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but I simply nodded. "Please." Harold sat, adjusting his tie in that nervous gesture I'd observed countless times from across crowded rooms. "I owe you an apology," he began, which surprised me. Harold Fitzgerald didn't apologize, he occasionally expressed regret for miscommunications or unfortunate circumstances, but never outright apologized. "You don't owe me anything," I said carefully. "We both know how this industry works." "Do we?" He leaned back, studying me with the intensity usually reserved for hostile takeovers. "Because I thought I knew how it worked. Young accountants pay their dues, learn from seniors, gradually take on more responsibility. The cream rises to the top." "The visible cream," I corrected. "The ones who look the part, who went to the right schools, who have the right connections. I'm from Brooklyn, Mr. Fitzgerald. My father drives a taxi. My mother cleans offices, including this one, actually, though you wouldn't know that. I knew the traditional path wasn't available to me." His eyebrows rose. "Your mother works for our cleaning service?" "Night shift. She's probably vacuumed this room 1,000 times. She's very proud that I work here. She tells all her colleagues that her daughter works at Fitzgerald and Associates, even if she's just a junior accountant." The personal revelation shifted something in Harold's expression. For the first time, he seemed to see me as more than just a problem to be solved or an asset to be negotiated. "So you built your own path?" "Through Marcus Ashford." "I didn't seek him out," I said. "It started with a scheduling conflict. You double-booked him with the Henderson meeting, and I had to call to reschedule. He asked me a question about tax implications for a real estate deal. I answered. He asked another. I answered that too. One thing led to another." "And you never thought to inform your supervisors that you were advising a major client?" I met his gaze steadily. "Every time I tried to contribute ideas in meetings, I was told to take notes. Every analysis I submitted was credited to someone else. After 6 months, I stopped trying to be visible and focused on being effective instead." Harold was quiet for a moment, processing this. Through the glass walls, I could see other senior partners pretending to work while obviously watching our discussion. The news would be all over the firm by lunch. The junior accountant who'd been secretly managing Marcus Ashford, who'd forced Harold Fitzgerald to give up his seat at the head of the table. "The compensation Marcus suggested," Harold said finally. "It's substantial for someone at your level." "My level?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared months ago, hoping for an opportunity that never came. "Until now. Let me show you something." I spread out the papers, client analyses, portfolio performances, strategic recommendations. But more importantly, I showed him the results. The Henderson account. You wondered why they suddenly increased their investment by 30% last year? Harold's face paled as he recognized each account, each success his senior team had taken credit for. "You did all this?" "While fetching coffee and organizing files and scheduling meetings, yes." I kept my voice level, professional. "I'm not asking for retroactive recognition. But going forward, my compensation should reflect my actual contributions, not my official title." He was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence of how badly his firm had mismanaged its human resources. Finally, he said, "Marcus suggested $200,000 base. Plus 20% performance bonus and full benefits," I added. "Including parking. That's more than some of our senior associates make. Then perhaps you should re-evaluate their contributions as well." I gathered the papers back into the folder. "Mr. Fitzgerald, we both know Marcus Ashford won't be the only client who follows me if I leave. The question is whether Fitzgerald and Associates wants to be the firm that recognized talent or the firm that lost it." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression tightened. "The Singapore call, Marcus wants to move it to noon instead of 2 p.m. He says you'll know why." I did know why. The Asian markets would be closing soon, and Marcus wanted to make trades based on our discussion. It was a test. Could I pivot immediately, or would I need those extra 2 hours to prepare? "That's fine. I'll be ready." Harold stood, straightening his jacket. "I'll have HR draw up the paperwork. $200,000 base, 20% performance bonus based on portfolio growth, full benefits including parking." You'll report directly to me for now, though we both know that's largely a formality given Marcus's requirements. Thank you, I said simply. He paused at the door. Sophia? That comment about evaluating our senior associates' contributions, were you serious? I thought about all the junior staff members who might be doing invisible work, keeping the firm running while being overlooked and undervalued. Completely serious. Talent is talent, regardless of where it comes from or what it looks like. Fitzgerald and Associates can either recognize that or watch it walk out the door. He nodded slowly. We'll discuss it further. After you've settled into your new role. My new role? The words felt surreal. This morning I'd been a junior accountant who fetched coffee. By noon, I'd be presenting to international partners as the lead portfolio manager for one of the firm's largest clients. The transformation was dizzying. As Harold left, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar, Marcus's office. Sophia Winters, I answered, practicing the confidence I'd need to project from now on. Ms. Winters, this is Patricia Pemberton. The voice was cultured, with that particular Manhattan accent that came from generations of private schools. Marcus Ashford suggested I call you. I understand you're taking on new clients. The Pemberton family. Old money, the kind that traced its roots back to the Mayflower. The kind of clients Fitzgerald and Associates courted for years before earning their business. And Patricia Pemberton was calling me directly. I'd be happy to discuss your financial needs, Mrs. Pemberton, I said, reaching for my calendar. When would be convenient for you? This afternoon, if possible. Marcus speaks very highly of your work, particularly your discretion. We have some sensitive matters that require careful handling. Sensitive matters. In the world of high net worth individuals, that could mean anything from offshore accounts to family disputes over inheritance. I can meet you at 3 p.m. Would you prefer to come to our offices, or shall I come to you? Oh, I think your offices would be best. I'd like to see where my money would be managed. She paused. And I'd like Harold Fitzgerald to know I'm there. We have history. The undercurrents in her tone suggested that history wasn't entirely pleasant. I'll make sure you're properly welcomed, Mrs. Pemberton. After she hung up, I sat back in the leather chair, trying to process the morning's events. In the span of 2 hours, I'd gone from invisible to essential, from $52,000 to $200,000, from serving coffee to being served. And it was only 10 a.m. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa, the junior accountant who'd asked about coffee earlier. The whole floor is talking about you. What happened? I thought about how to respond, how to explain that 3 years of being underestimated had been my greatest advantage. That every dismissed idea and overlooked contribution had been building toward this moment. That sometimes the best strategy isn't to fight for visibility but to build value in the shadows until someone like Marcus Ashford makes it impossible to ignore. Instead, I simply typed, I got promoted. Her response was immediate, to what? I smiled, thinking of Patricia Pemberton coming to see me this afternoon, of the Singapore partners waiting for my analysis, of Harold Fitzgerald having to ask permission to sit in his own conference room. To visible. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. I refined my Singapore presentation, adding recent market data that had come in overnight. I researched Patricia Pemberton's holdings, using my newly granted access to the firm's premium databases, the ones I'd been locked out of as a junior accountant. The depth of information available was staggering. All those nights I'd spent piecing together analysis from public records and free sources, and the senior team had this at their fingertips the entire time. At 11:45, I made my way back to the executive conference room. The Singapore partners were already on screen, 3 serious-faced men in identical dark suits despite the late hour in their time zone. Marcus appeared moments later, taking a seat to my right, a subtle but clear indication that I was leading this call. Gentlemen, I began, sharing my screen to display the presentation. Thank you for accommodating the schedule change. Let's discuss the Asian market expansion, specifically the opportunities in sustainable manufacturing that align with Mr. Ashford's portfolio values. For the next 40 minutes, I walked them through my analysis, market trends, regulatory considerations, potential partnerships, risk assessments. The Singapore partners asked pointed questions, the kind that revealed they'd done their homework and weren't easily impressed. But I had answers. 3 years of studying markets on my commute, of reading regulatory updates during lunch breaks, of understanding global finance from the ground up rather than the ivory tower down, it all crystallized in this moment. Your analysis of the Singapore regulatory environment, one partner said, leaning forward, it's more thorough than what our local consultants provided. How did you identify the tax incentive program that launches next quarter? It hasn't been publicly announced. I read the minutes from the Ministry of Finance's planning sessions, I explained. They're published in Mandarin, which might be why your consultants missed them. I used translation software and cross-referenced with similar programs in Hong Kong and Tokyo to verify my understanding. Marcus turned to look at me, eyebrows raised. I'd never mentioned that I spent evenings teaching myself to navigate foreign financial documents. It hadn't seemed relevant when my official job was organizing files. Impressive, the lead partner said. Marcus, I believe we have our answer. With Ms. Winters managing the portfolio structure, I'm comfortable proceeding with the expansion. After the call ended and the Singapore partners signed off, Marcus remained seated. Mandarin financial documents? Google Translate has gotten very sophisticated, I said, deflecting. And patterns in financial regulation tend to be universal, even across languages. How many languages financial documents have you been reading? 7. Well, 8 if you count Canadian French as separate from Parisian French, which you should for regulatory purposes. He laughed, the sound filling the conference room. And Harold had you fetching coffee. It's almost tragic if it weren't so predictable. He stood, checking his watch. Patricia Pemberton called me after she spoke with you. She's intrigued. Be careful with her, she's brilliant but vindictive. She and Harold had a falling out years ago over her late husband's estate. She'll enjoy making him squirm. I'll maintain complete professionalism, I assured him. Oh, I'm counting on it. Your professionalism while everyone else loses their minds is half the entertainment value. He headed for the door, then paused. Sophia? That firm I mentioned, if you decided to go solo? The offer stands. I know several other investors who would follow you. But, he glanced around the executive conference room. It might be more satisfying to transform this place from the inside. After he left, I sat alone again, contemplating his words. Starting my own firm would be the ultimate vindication, from invisible junior accountant to independent portfolio manager in one dramatic leap. But Marcus was right. There was something appealing about staying, about showing Harold and the senior partners how much talent they'd been wasting, about potentially changing the culture that had kept me and others like me invisible for so long. My phone rang, the main reception desk. Ms. Winters? Mrs. Patricia Pemberton has arrived for her 3 p.m. appointment. Shall I send her to your office? My office? Which I didn't have yet. I thought quickly. Please escort her to the executive conference room. I'll meet her there. I had just enough time to refresh my makeup and straighten my suit before Patricia Pemberton arrived. She was exactly what I'd expected, silver hair in a perfect chignon, understated designer clothes that whispered rather than shouted their value, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She also brought an entourage, her personal lawyer, her current financial advisor, and what appeared to be her adult son. Ms. Winters, she said, extending a manicured hand. You're younger than I expected. I get that a lot, I replied, shaking her hand firmly. Please, have a seat. Can I offer you anything? Coffee, water? Coffee would be lovely. Black, no sugar. She settled into a chair with the grace of someone who'd been taught proper posture in Swiss finishing schools. I assume you'll be fetching it yourself? I heard that's been your specialty here. The test was subtle but clear. Would I bristle at the reference to my former duties? Would I delegate to show my new status? Or would I handle it with the same professionalism I'd shown while being invisible? I'd be happy to, I said simply, moving to the coffee station in the corner, the same one I'd used countless times before. I make excellent coffee. It's one of many skills I've developed here. Her lips twitched in what might have been approval. Marcus said you were unflappable. Tell me, Ms. Winters, what do you know about my situation? I poured the coffee, using the bone china cups reserved for VIP clients. I know that your late husband's estate was valued at approximately $300 million. I know there were complications with the trust structure that led to disputes with this firm. And I know you're currently seeking new management for approximately $50 million in liquid assets. You've done your homework. She accepted the coffee, taking a small sip. Perfect. Just like your research. Yes, Harold and I had a disagreement about the handling of certain offshore entities. He wanted to take a conservative approach that would have cost me millions in taxes. I wanted someone with more creative thinking. Creative but legal, I clarified, returning to my seat. I don't engage in tax evasion, Mrs. Pemberton. I do, however, excel at tax efficiency within the full bounds of the law. Precisely what I'm looking for. She gestured to her companions. This is my attorney, James Morrison, no relation to your Janet Morrison, thankfully. My current advisor, Peterson, who will be transitioning out. And my son, Daniel, who insists on being involved despite having no interest in finance. Daniel Pemberton looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he nodded politely. Mother insists I understand where the money goes. I just want to ensure she's not being taken advantage of. A reasonable concern, I said. I'm happy to explain every strategy, every fee, every transaction in as much or as little detail as you'd like. For the next hour, I walked them through my proposed approach to managing their portfolio. Unlike the traditional pitch full of jargon and promises, I focused on specifics, tax strategies that would save them money immediately, restructuring options for their real estate holdings, ways to increase liquidity without triggering massive capital gains. I showed them examples from my work with Marcus, careful to maintain confidentiality while demonstrating results. This trust structure you're suggesting, James Morrison leaned forward, studying my diagrams. It's elegant. Almost artistic in its simplicity. Where did you study tax law? NYU for the formal education. But the real education came from necessity. When you don't have access to expensive tax attorneys, you learn to read the code yourself. Patricia set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. I want to transfer the assets by end of business today. Peterson, the current advisor, spluttered. Patricia, that's highly irregular. We should do proper due diligence, transition meetings. We've been doing transition meetings for 6 months while you done nothing but bill hours. Patricia cut him off. Ms. Winters has shown me more innovative strategies in 1 hour than you've presented in half a year. James, draw up the paperwork. Mother, Daniel interjected, are you sure about this? She's so young. Patricia looked at her son with fond exasperation. When I was her age, I was running 3 companies while your father played golf. Youth isn't a liability, Daniel. Complacency is. She turned back to me. I have one condition. I want Harold Fitzgerald to personally sign off on the transfer. I want him to know exactly how much business he's losing and why. The vindictiveness Marcus had warned me about was clear, but I couldn't blame her. Being dismissed, undervalued, and overlooked, I understood the desire for vindication. I'll arrange for Mr. Fitzgerald to handle the paperwork personally. As her entourage prepared to leave, Patricia lingered. Marcus told me about this morning. About how they had you fetching coffee while you were managing million-dollar strategies. It's a familiar story. She adjusted her handbag, a subtle Hermes that probably cost more than my annual salary, my old annual salary. When I started in business, they had me taking notes in board meetings while my ideas were credited to men who couldn't balance their own checkbooks. The difference is, I had my husband's money as leverage. You did this on talent alone. That's far more impressive. After they left, I called Harold's extension. His assistant answered, the same one who used to treat me like furniture. Mr. Fitzgerald's office. This is Sophia Winters. I need Mr. Fitzgerald to come to the executive conference room to sign off on a new client transfer. I'm sorry, who is this? Sophia Winters, I repeated patiently. The junior, the portfolio manager handling the Pemberton account. Mrs. Patricia Pemberton specifically requested that Mr. Fitzgerald personally handle the paperwork. The silence on the other end suggested the assistant was processing this information. I'll check his calendar. He'll make time, I said with more confidence than I felt. The transfer is worth $50 million. Harold appeared within 10 minutes, looking like he'd aged years since this morning. The Pemberton estate? Patricia swore she'd never work with us again. She's not working with the firm, I clarified. She's working with me. But she wants you to handle the paperwork. She was very specific about that. His jaw tightened as he understood. Patricia wanted him to process the forms, to see his signature on documents that transferred $50 million to the junior accountant he'd overlooked. It was petty and brilliant and exactly the kind of power play that defined Manhattan finance. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Send me the documents. They'll be ready within the hour. Oh, and Mr. Fitzgerald? I'll need that office we discussed. Patricia expects to meet in my space next week, and I don't think the cubicle would send the right message. Human Resources is preparing your new office. Corner of the 40th floor. Corner office? I couldn't hide my surprise. Corner offices were for senior partners, not newly promoted portfolio managers. Marcus Ashford was very specific about your working conditions. As was Patricia, apparently, in her initial call. He turned to leave, then stopped. 3 years. You've been here 3 years, and I never saw it. Never saw you. You saw what you expected to see, I said, not unkindly. Most people do. He left without another word, and I was alone again in the executive conference room that had become my temporary kingdom. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting golden stripes across the mahogany table where I'd served coffee that morning. The symmetry was almost poetic. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Are you still coming for dinner? I'm making your favorite. I smiled, imagining her reaction when I told her about the salary, the office, the clients seeking me out by name. But mostly, I imagined telling her that I'd finally been seen. That all those late nights studying while she vacuumed these very offices had led somewhere. That her daughter wasn't just working at Fitzgerald and Associates, she was transforming it. On my way soon, I typed back. And Mom? We're going somewhere nice this weekend. My treat. Her response was immediate, "Did you get a raise?" "Something like that," I replied, then added, "I'll explain at dinner." I gathered my things, preparing to leave the executive floor for my cubicle one last time. Tomorrow, I'd have a corner office. Tomorrow, I'd have Patricia Pemberton's $50 million portfolio and whatever other clients Marcus sent my way. Tomorrow, I'd start the real work of proving that invisible didn't mean insignificant. But tonight, I was going home to Brooklyn, to the apartment where I studied tax law at a kitchen table while my mother worried about making rent. I was going to tell her that her daughter, the one who was just a junior accountant, had brought Harold Fitzgerald to his knees with nothing more than competence and quiet determination. The elevator descended through the floors of Fitzgerald and Associates, past the senior partners' offices where people were probably still discussing the morning's events, past the middle management floors where ambitious associates plotted their rise, down to the cubicle farm where the invisible army kept the machine running. As the doors opened on my floor, I saw my fellow junior staff members waiting, their faces full of questions. "Is it true?" Melissa asked breathlessly. "Did Marcus Ashford really refuse to sign without you? Did you really get a corner office?" another asked. "Did Harold really give up his seat at the conference table?" I looked at their eager faces, all of them brilliant, all of them undervalued, all of them invisible in their own ways. Tomorrow, I'd have power. Tomorrow, I'd have influence. Tomorrow, I could start changing things for all of them. "It's true," I said simply. "All of it." The questions came in a flood then. How had I done it? How long had I been planning? What was my secret? But I just smiled and made my way to my cubicle, where a cardboard box waited. HR had sent a memo that my belongings would be moved to my new office, but there were a few things I wanted to handle personally. I picked up the framed photo of my college graduation, my parents flanking me, their faces glowing with pride despite the rain that had soaked through our clothes. My father in his best suit, the one he wore for wedding fairs and special occasions. My mother clutching her purse, the same one she carried for 15 years because it was good leather and still had life in it. They'd been so proud that their daughter had graduated college, that she'd gotten a job at a firm with a name they couldn't pronounce but knew was important. Tomorrow, they'd be proud for different reasons. I added a few personal items to the box, the spare shoes I kept under my desk for when my commute heels gave me blisters. The tea collection I'd accumulated for late nights, the notebook where I'd written every idea that had been dismissed in meetings. Especially that notebook. It would look different in a corner office, transformed from the desperate scribbling of an overlooked junior to the strategic planning of a portfolio manager. "Sophia?" Harold's assistant appeared at my cubicle, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Fitzgerald asked me to give you this." She handed me an envelope, thick, expensive paper with the firm's letterhead. Inside, a single paragraph in Harold's precise handwriting. "Ms. Winters, your performance today has shown me that Fitzgerald and Associates has been failing in its most fundamental duty, recognizing and nurturing talent regardless of its source. Effective immediately, I'm implementing a full review of our junior staff development programs. I hope you'll consider leading that initiative once you've settled into your new role. We have work to do. H. Fitzgerald." I read it twice, feeling something shift in my chest. This morning, I'd wanted vindication. I'd wanted Harold and everyone else to see what they'd missed, to regret their blindness. But this was something else. This was the beginning of change, real change, the kind that could make sure no other brilliant junior accountant spent 3 years being invisible. "Tell Mr. Fitzgerald I'll consider it," I said to his assistant. "After I've established my portfolio management systems." She nodded and hurried away, probably eager to report back on the woman who appended the firm's hierarchy in a single morning. As she left, others took her place, junior accountants, administrative assistants, even a few brave analysts from the floor above. They didn't say anything, just nodded or smiled or gave small waves of acknowledgement. We'd all been invisible together. My sudden visibility gave them hope that their own recognition might come. By the time I left the building, the October evening had painted Manhattan in shades of amber and shadow. The familiar walk to the subway felt different now, not the trudge of an overlooked employee heading home to study for credentials that might not matter, but the confident stride of someone who'd finally been seen. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with LinkedIn notifications, connection requests from people who'd never acknowledged my existence before. I ignored them all. There would be time for networking later, time to build the relationships that should have started 3 years ago. The subway car was packed with the usual crowd of exhausted professionals, and I found myself studying them differently. How many of them were invisible in their own offices? How many brilliant ideas were dismissed before they could bloom? How many Patricia Pembertons and Marcus Ashfords were out there, waiting for someone to prove their worth outside the traditional channels? My stop came too quickly, lost as I was in contemplation. The familiar walk from the subway to my parents' building had never felt shorter. The doorman, who'd watched me grow up, did a double take at something in my expression. Good evening, Miss Sophia. You look different tonight. Good different, Carlos? He grinned. Very good different. Like you won something big. In a way, I agreed, I did. The elevator in my parents' building was nothing like the sleek one at Fitzgerald and Associates, but it carried me just as surely to where I needed to be. The hallway smelled of Mrs. Chen's cooking from 4B and the flowers Mr. Rodriguez always kept by his door. These were my roots, my foundation, the world that had shaped me into someone who could see opportunity where others saw only coffee runs and filing duties. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face bright with curiosity. Mia. Come in, come in. Your father's held dinner for 40 minutes. You know how he gets when the food gets cold. Sorry, Mom. It's been a day. My father looked up from his newspaper, studying me over his reading glasses. A lifetime of reading people through his rearview mirror had made him perceptive in ways that Harvard MBAs could never learn. Something's changed, he said simply. Good change? Very good change, I said, setting down my bag and taking my usual seat at the kitchen table where I'd spent countless hours studying. Remember how I told you about that important client I sometimes helped? The one you couldn't talk about? My mother set down plates of arroz con pollo, the comfort food of my childhood. Very mysterious, like a spy movie. Well, today he told everyone that I've been managing his accounts. And he refused to work with anyone else. My parents exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that came from 30 years of marriage and shared struggle. And this is good? My mother asked carefully. They promoted me, I said, the words still feeling surreal. Portfolio manager. Corner office. And I took a breath. A salary of $200,000. The silence that followed was complete. My mother's serving spoon hovered in midair. My father's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. They'd been proud when I'd gotten the job at Fitzgerald and Associates for $52,000, a fortune compared to their combined income. This was beyond their frame of reference. Dollars, my mother finally whispered. American dollars? Yes, Mom. American dollars. Per year? Per year. Plus bonuses. My father set down his newspaper with shaking hands. Sophia, that's. For times what I was making this morning, I finished. I know. My mother sank into her chair, the serving spoon forgotten. But how? You're so young. You said they didn't listen to you. They didn't. So I found someone who would. And I proved myself to him, quietly, carefully, over time. Today he made it impossible for them to ignore me anymore. I told them the whole story then, from the first phone call with Marcus Ashford to Harold giving up his seat to Patricia Pemberton's vindictive satisfaction. My parents listened without interrupting, their food growing cold as they absorbed the fairy tale transformation of their invisible daughter into someone corner offices were reserved for. This man, this Marcus, my father said finally, he's trustworthy? He's the most ethical person I've met in finance, I assured him. He could have kept quiet about my work, taken credit for the strategies I developed. Instead, he made sure everyone knew exactly who was creating value. And the woman with $50 million, she came to you? Not the company, but you specifically. On Marcus's recommendation, yes. But I had to prove myself to her too. 1 hour to convince her to move $50 million. I smiled, remembering. She liked that I made the coffee myself instead of delegating. Said it showed I hadn't forgotten where I came from. My mother reached across the table to grasp my hand. We're proud of you, Mija. We've always been proud, but this. She squeezed tighter. You did this yourself. No connections, no favors, just hard work and brilliance. And invisibility, I added. Being overlooked was my advantage. While they were watching each other, I was learning everything. Like a ninja, my father said with a small smile. A financial ninja. We laughed then, the tension breaking into something warmer. The food was indeed cold, but my mother reheated it, and we ate together as we had hundreds of times before. Except now, I could tell them about my work without simplifying, could share the strategies and victories that had been secrets for so long. My mother asked surprisingly astute questions about tax structures, a reminder that intelligence ran in families, even if opportunities didn't always. After dinner, I helped wash dishes, standing at the sink where I'd had so many revelations about financial theory while scrubbing pots. My mother worked beside me, humming softly. This office of yours, she said carefully, it has windows? Corner office, Mom. Windows on 2 walls. View of the city. And they'll treat you with respect now? No more coffee fetching? I might still fetch my own coffee, I admitted. But now it's a choice, not an obligation. She nodded, satisfied. Good. And this money, you'll be careful? Save some? I'll be careful, I promised. But Mom? This weekend, we're going shopping. You need a new purse. She glanced at her faithful leather bag on the counter. This one still has life in it. I know. But you deserve something special. Something that makes you feel how I felt today when Harold Fitzgerald asked permission to sit in his own conference room. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. He really did that? He really did. My daughter, making important men ask permission. She dried her hands on her apron, another item I'd be replacing soon. Your grandmother would have loved this. She always said the women in our family were meant for more than what the world offered them. Later, my father drove me home, a rare treat, since I usually took the subway. You know, he said as we navigated the familiar streets. I've driven a lot of successful people in my cab. Wall Street types who talked about their deals, their bonuses, their victories. But none of them impressed me like you do tonight. Why's that? Because they were given their chances. You had to create yours. He pulled up to my building, a modest pre-war in a decent neighborhood, nothing like the luxury high-rises where my colleagues lived. This changes things for you. You know that, right? The money, the position, it changes how people see you. I'm counting on it, I said. That's how I'll change things for others. He nodded approvingly. That's my girl. Use the power well. Back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table where I'd spent so many nights building the knowledge that had saved Marcus Ashford millions. The same laptop that had crashed repeatedly while I ran complex models sat closed now. Tomorrow, I'd have access to the best technology money could buy. But it was this table, this determination, this refusal to accept invisibility as permanent that had brought me here. My phone had accumulated dozens of messages. Former classmates who'd somehow heard the news. Colleagues who suddenly remembered my name. Even Professor Williamson from NYU heard about your promotion. Not surprised. That offer to join my practice stands. But the message that mattered most was from Marcus. Well played today. Patricia called. She's thrilled and planning to recommend you to 3 other families. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, the real work begins. The real work. Building a client base that trusted me, not just the firm. Changing the culture that had kept me and others invisible. Proving that talent could come from anywhere, look like anything, and still exceed every expectation. I opened my notebook, the one where I'd written every dismissed idea, and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, Day 1 is visible. Below it, I began listing not goals for myself, but changes I wanted to make for others. A mentorship program for junior staff. Transparent promotion criteria. Anonymous suggestion systems that couldn't be ignored. Ways to ensure that the next brilliant kid from Brooklyn or the Bronx or anywhere else wouldn't need 3 years of invisibility and a Marcus Ashford to be seen. As midnight approached, I closed the notebook and prepared for bed. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Fitzgerald and Associates with a different status, a different future, a different set of possibilities. But I'd also walk in with the same determination that had carried me through 3 years of being overlooked. The difference was, now they'd be watching. And I intended to give them something worth seeing.